There is an old story, short, true and simple, about an old man named Mr. Chimpimple. He lived in a shed at the back of his house and brought pleasure to many every time he went out. For when he went for a walk, he would stumble and stagger, and he had, on a lead, his friendly pet badger. His badger was fluffy and kindly and nice, and was called Mrs. Jim, because she was Mr. Jim's wife. What had happened to Mr. Jim was not known, but kind Mrs. Jim was not on her own. Her and Chimpimple were the bestest of friends, and were always together wherever they went. When out on their walk, they brought smiles and surprise to all of the people who would come passing by. They would shriek in delight, for 'twas not often they'd seen a cute fluffy badger on a lovely long lead. And old Mr. Chimpimple, with his 2 walking sticks, stumbling along while feeding Mrs. Jim chips. Everyone loved talking to the lovely old man, and stroking soft Mrs. Jim and feeding her jam. Mr. Chimpimple would tell stories about strange forest folk, and when he lived on a river in an upside-down boat. Everyone loved him and listened and laughed, and were welcomed and warmed by old Chimpimple's heart. But one day, all the people in the nearby park had gathered together as the damp day grew dark. No one had seen Chimpimple or Mrs. Jim. They missed his fun stories and the laughter he'd bring. He took Mrs. Jim for a walk every day. It was most unlike him to leave it this late. So everyone went round to Chimpimple's shed and found old Chimpimple was trapped in his bed. Kind Mrs. Jim was feeding him chips, and on the floor, split in 2, were his 2 walking sticks. Without his 2 sticks, he just could not get up. Poor old Chimpimple was completely stuck. So everyone helped the lovely old man, gluing his sticks back together with jam, and helping him up right out of his bed, and guiding him out of his cosy old shed. Together they all went for a lovely long walk, listening and laughing as Chimpimple talked, stroking kind Mrs. Jim and feeding her chips, and buying Chimpimple 2 new walking sticks. Yes, life is made better by the simplest of things, like meeting Mr. Chimpimple and kind Mrs. Jim. Mr. Chimpimple and kind Mrs. Jim, love, life and laughter they joyfully bring. Out on their walk all the people they meet. When strangers become friends, just follow your feet. When strangers become friends, just follow your feet. Follow your feet, follow your feet. Mr. Chimpimple and kind Mrs. Jim, telling mad stories about everything, bringing a smile that can brighten the dark. When strangers become friends, just follow your heart. When strangers become friends, just follow your heart. Follow your heart. Follow your heart. Follow